Hi everyone, in this tutorial I'm going to teach you how to make a simple traditional cotton dishcloth. These dishcloths are super easy to knit up and they can be used not just as dishcloths but as pot holders or even just trivets on your kitchen countertop. For this project you're going to need a skein of cotton yarn, about a 4-ply or worsted weight cotton yarn, size 7 knitting needles. I'm using double pointed needles for the demonstration, but you certainly don't need double pointed needles, just regular needles are fine. A tapestry needle for weaving in the ends, and an optional crochet hook if you want to make a loop at the end of this dishcloth, and scissors for cutting your yarn. So before we get started with the step-by-step tutorial, I just wanted to show you how this piece is worked up. So we actually start off by knitting just 4 stitches or casting on just 4 stitches, and the way it's worked up is with each row you're going to be increasing 1 stitch, and that's what causes this to flare out like that in both directions. And then once you get to the desired width of this sort of diagonal, then you would decrease 1 stitch on each end for it to then get to the end point where it'll again be, but you'll be binding off 4 stitches at the end. So super easy to knit. Let's get started. You want to start off by casting on 4 stitches, and I'm going to cast these on in the long tail cast on method. If you're not familiar with that, I've provided a link below for that video. And all you need to do is cast on 4 stitches, and I would cast these on somewhat loosely, not super tight. Once you've cast on the 4 stitches, the way the pattern works, and I've written this pattern down in the description field, the very first row is just knit all the way across. So that's easily done. On the next row and all subsequent rows, you'll work on increasing 1 stitch each row. And so to do that, the pattern goes, you knit the first 2 stitches, and then to make the increase, what you do is you bring the yarn forwards of the right needle. Leave that yarn forward like this, or yarn over like this, and then go in to knit the next stitch. When you do that, you'll notice that we have now made an extra stitch right here. And then whatever stitches are left on the left needle, you're just going to be knitting them through to the end, which in this case is just 1 stitch, since this was our very first row. And now you'll do the same exact thing in the next row. So you'll start off by knitting the first 2 stitches, and then yarn over, and then knit the next stitch and all remaining stitches. And as you do this with each row, you're just following the same thing. You'll be increasing 1 row or 1 stitch on each side. So again, knit the first 2 stitches, then yarn over and knit the next and all the remaining stitches. So as you keep doing this, you'll realize that little by little, stitch by stitch, you are increasing the number of stitches and your work starts increasing. So let's take a look at what that'll look like after you've done a few stitches. And here I have a little tiny dishcloth that I'm working on. I've only done a few rows, as you can see, but with each row we've increased a stitch, and it gives you this pretty pattern of little tiny holes on the sides, those yarn overs that we did. And as you can see, it's starting to increase. So I have about 15 stitches here. The pattern for this dishcloth that I showed you earlier calls for 50 stitches. So you would keep doing this until you have 50 stitches on your needle. You can bring it down to 44 if you want a slightly smaller dishcloth, or you can increase it if you want a bigger one. But whatever's your stop point, once you've reached the desired number of stitches or the width, at that point you're going to start the decreases. So to decrease, the technique that we use in the pattern is you knit the first stitch, Then you knit the next 2 stitches together. It's called knit 2 together, or in patterns you'll see it written as K2 TOG, K2 tog, which is again knit 2 together. So to knit 2 together, you're going to insert your needle into both stitches on the left needle through that front loop, yarn across or yarn over that needle, pull out the stitch, and you're going to drop both stitches off. Okay, let's see that one more time. You knit the first stitch, then knit 2 together. So insert your needle through the front loop of both stitches, wrap your yarn around, pull it through, and drop both stitches off. So we've essentially taken 2 stitches and condensed it down to 1 stitch. So we've decreased by 1 stitch. Next, you're actually going to do a yarn over. So we're back to increasing it by 1 stitch. And then we decrease the next 2 stitches again by doing knit 2 together. And same thing, insert your needle through both stitches, pull the stitch out, and drop off both stitches. So we knit the first stitch. The next 2 stitches we knit them together to bring it down to 1 stitch. We then did a yarn over, and then we did a knit 2 together and brought it down again to 1 stitch. So we took a total of 4 stitches and brought it down to 3 by doing this pattern. And in doing so, we've decreased this row by 1 stitch, because the rest of the rows or rest of the stitches for this row, you're just going to knit all the way across. And once I get to the end of this row, we'll go ahead and we'll do it one more time. So from this point on, you're just going to keep doing the same exact pattern for each row, essentially decreasing by 1 stitch every row. So again, you start by knitting the first stitch, then knit the next 2 stitches together, then bring the yarn over and next 2 stitches together. And at the end of it, especially when you're first starting off, just check to see you've got the 3 stitches, that you haven't forgotten this yarn over, and then you're just going to knit all the way across. So once you've done this, you're going to keep doing this until you are down to 4 stitches, just like where you started. So let's take a look at what that would look like once you've brought your work down to 4 stitches. And here I have this piece. This is my tiny little doll's house dishcloth. There, I brought it down to about 5 stitches, so I still need to do 1 more row so that I can decrease it by 1 more stitch. So I'm going to knit 1, I'm going to knit 2 together, then yarn over, and then knit the last 2 stitches together. And that leaves me with 4 stitches at the end. Once you're down to 4 stitches, you're going to knit across all 4 stitches. So just knit, and then you're going to cast off or bind off these stitches using just regular bind off. And if you're not familiar with the regular binding off technique, I've provided a link to that video tutorial in the description field. Now once you've bound off the stitches, you have one of 2 options for the tail ends of the yarn on either side. If you know you're going to be using this as a dishcloth, then you can make a little loop. A couple different ways of making a loop. You could just bring this yarn over, just make a simple loop here, right here, take this yarn, wrap it around, and tie a knot right here, like so, and then cut your ends, and there you have a very, very simple loop. But a better way of making this loop, and I'll show you that. So what you want to do is, this is your last stitch that you've just pulled out. You still need to bind this off or close it up. So leave a longer tail, about 6 to 8 inch tail, and pull it through. I have a little bit of a longer tail here than the 8 inch tail, but when you do your work, you could just leave a 6 inch tail. And once you have that, you can use your crochet needle or crochet hook to actually insert it through just one of these edge stitches and pull out. Okay, so insert, hook it around and pull out a loop onto your crochet needle. And now you could just make a chain, a simple chain, which is a little bit sturdier than just a single strand of yarn for your loop. And so just make about 8 to 10 of these chains, maybe a few more if you want a bigger loop, and then you'll insert it back in there, bring it out, and once more. And once you've gotten to that point, just make this wider, put your yarn through it, pull your yarn through it, make a knot, and you have a pretty loop that your dishcloth can hang off of. Now for these tail ends here, or for the other side, since this is a cotton yarn, what you can do is actually split the yarn into 2 separate pieces. Each piece will have 2 plies depending on the thickness of your yarn. And since this is cotton, you don't have to worry too much about weaving in the ends all the way through. What you can do is just take one of those pieces that you've split up, use the tapestry needle to just put it through one of the back stitches, and then you can just tie them off. Tie once, pull it super tight, it's just about to break but not quite broken, and then tie it once more. Just a simple knot. And at that point you can actually just snip this very close to the knot, and it's not going to go anywhere. You can wash this dishcloth, throw it in the washer, or just wash it by hand, and it'll be just fine. So there you have it, a simple traditional dishcloth. It's a fun project and I hope you try it. For additional videos, do subscribe to my channel, Knittycat's Knits, and happy knitting!